What's up, Daddy Joe and jazz ladies out there? This your boy Satchel Armstrong, broadcasting live from the cabaret in the sky. And when I'm not busy doing my soloing on my two horn, I just tune into the artivist presents We All Be News and Radio. Oh, yeah.
We is proud to have on Sister Kim Briggs, who is a U.S. National Park Ranger at Harpers Ferry National Park. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Can you tell a little bit about Harpers Ferry, like why it's so significant and why people should visit?
Harpers Ferry has over 250 years of history. Everything from the industrial story. We were one of two United States armories established in our new country by President George Washington. The transportation story. Harpers Ferry is located at the confluence of the Potomac and the Shenandoah rivers, and it carves a gap through the Blue Ridge Mountains and serves as a natural passageway from the east to the west. The abolitionist John Brown, many feel that Brown was the catalyst, the spark that ignited the American Civil War. The Civil War itself played out in this little town over the 4 years. Harpers Ferry was affected from the very beginning to the very end. In African American history, which is rich, starting with the town founder, who we know had one slave. All we know of her was that her name was Beck, but that she was the beginning of Harpers Ferry's Black history, going up to John Brown attempting to free the slaves, to the opening of Storer College after the American Civil War, rising from the ashes and giving an entire segment of our population an opportunity for finally having a future, to teach them to read and to write and to make a future for themselves in this new society. And then the continual fight for full civil rights for African Americans with 1906, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois and the Niagara Movement meeting here at Harpers Ferry on the campus of Storer College and making a special pilgrimage to the site of John Brown's fort. And all of that is tied in with some incredible scenery, the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Shenandoah and the Potomac rivers surrounding us.
Oh, that's great. And so is there any place we should visit, like you would commend people like this, if it's their first time coming here? What would be a great suggestion of places they should visit?
I would definitely spend some time in what we refer to as the lower town, which is nestled in between the two rivers. There's close to 3 blocks of museums and exhibits on Harpers Ferry's history. So all of those stories that you just got a taste of, you're able to explore exhibits in museums with movies and touchscreen computers to go into more detail. And I'd also hopefully have the opportunity, make sure that you take the time to visit some of our outer areas, our Civil War battlefield sites, or the campus of Storer College, what we refer to as Camp Hill, which is one of the most beautiful spots in the national park, high on the hill overlooking the lower town. And you'll be able to see the heights, the mountains surrounding you.
And also, you have special programming throughout the year, like anything, some highlights?
We do. We have a schedule of events that typically comes out in February or March. And we have certain yearly events that we do annually. One in June, typically the last Saturday in June, is our Don Redman Heritage Concert. Don Redman was a graduate of Storer College, known as the Little Giant of Jazz. He was instrumental in the jazz field, and so in his honor, we bring in some of the most prominent jazz legends of their time. And this year we're working on contacting some folks, so that's to be determined, but I can guarantee you that you wouldn't have a more beautiful venue and a more enjoyable evening listening to music. And we try to bring in folks that have some type of connection to Don Redman, either having played with him themselves or having a connection with someone who did. And we also, in August every year, typically the Sunday closest to August 17th, when the Niagara Movement was with us, we have a commemoration of the pilgrimage to John Brown's Fort that Dr. Du Bois and the Niagara Movement did in 1906.
I'm a friend of Dick Gregory's. Do you have any Dick Gregory stories? I know he's a big fan of John Brown.
Well, in 2009, the 150th anniversary of John Brown's raid, December 2nd in 2009, there was a commemoration in Charlestown where Brown was tried and executed. And in the crowd, there were a number of National Park Service employees that kept pointing to a gentleman and whispering, "That looks like Dick Gregory. Is that Dick Gregory?" And sure enough, it was Mr. Gregory, and he had heard about the commemoration, and he had come to take part in that. He was very low key. Very humble. He just wanted to be a part of this 150th anniversary event, and we were certainly very honored to have him there witnessing it, and got to speak with him, and very nice man, and very well versed in the John Brown story and the history. So that was certainly a highlight for all of us who were there that day.
Sister Biggs.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Biggs, I want to thank you for talking to us today about Harpers Ferry National Park. In the words of Great Gallatin, we love you madly, and keep on producing and pushing.
Well, thank you. And just spread the word of Harpers Ferry and our story, and just encourage everyone to come and visit us. We're one of over 400 national parks in the United States, and these national parks belong to the American people, and people like myself are just lucky enough that we get to take care of them for you, but they certainly are yours, and we encourage you to go to your closest national park and find something there that you love, and of course we hope that you come to Harpers Ferry as well.
I appreciate it. A couple more questions. I know something came in my head. Are there Civil War reenactments done here? There's
not Civil War reenactments per se. The National Park Service frowns on actual reenactments, what you would think of as recreating battles, because this is hallowed ground. This is sacred ground. But we do have what we call encampments, where living history volunteers, living historians, come periodically, and this is primarily in the summertime on weekends, and they may set up camp, and they may give interpretive programs talking about what life or a specific event was like during the Civil War, and that's something we decide typically in February or March. So I'd encourage anyone interested to check the park website. Just Google Harpers Ferry National Historical Park, and you'll be able to find our park website, and then our schedule of events for the activities that are going to be going on in 2015.
What about anybody from John Brown's family, extended family, reached out to the park? Or do y'all have any?
We had a number of descendants with us in 2009, and one of our rangers, Ranger Guinevere Roper, was in charge of the descendant committee, and she has a list of John Brown descendants, as well as John Brown Raider descendants. And Brown would have 21 men that would come with him here to Harpers Ferry. They were known as Raiders. 5 were African Americans, 1 was a Canadian, 3 were his own sons, but men all believing, as Brown did, that slavery needed to be ended. Then, right at that minute. And so we were fortunate that we had a number of descendants participate in the 2009. And in fact, in the Niagara pilgrimage, we just had descendant of Edwin Coppock. There were 2 Quaker brothers, the Coppock brothers, Barclay and Edwin. And their descendants are in the area, and they participated during the Niagara movement pilgrimage with us. So yes, we are still in contact with them.
Okay, I got one. What is the greatest falsehood you feel like about Harpers Ferry? Like when people come in, what's the greatest misconception that people have about Harpers Ferry?
I think the greatest misconception is that we're just a stopover, that we're not a destination park, a place where you could spend several days exploring. Most people know the John Brown raid story, but most people do not know that we're a lot more. Granted, that's a critical part of our story, but it is just a part of our story. And as I mentioned earlier, that we're rich in African American history, we're rich in the Civil War history, in the industrial history, and we've got close to 20 miles of hiking trails as well. So it's not just for someone who is interested in history, but I believe we have something for everyone. If you just want to take a walk down along the river, if you just want to enjoy the scenery, we have that. And so I always enjoy when people come and they're amazed, or they say, I was only going to spend an hour here and I've been here all day. So that's pretty cool. I think that we're one of the hidden gems of the National Park Service, and once we get folks here, and hopefully you can help us do that, the place, the site, the history speaks for itself.
And one more question, I like the curious history of the John Brown Fort House. It reminded me of Lincoln's Log Cabin, like you said, they moved around a lot.
It has.
Can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, what's the saying, if walls could talk, or if buildings could talk? Because John Brown's fort, which was actually the fire engine house to the armory complex, and the armory was the main industry here in Harpers Ferry. That was the gun factory. When Brown arrived into Harpers Ferry, he and his men, the 21 Raiders, they would ultimately be pushed back. The townspeople came out to fight them, not knowing that it was John Brown at the time, but that there were insurgents here in town attempting to take over the federal gun factory. It was a government installation, and that there were 5 African Americans with them. And the worst fear for a Southerner, and we were Virginia at that point, was an armed black man. And so as the townspeople came out, Brown was pushed back through the streets, and he would barricade himself right at the entrance to the armory complex, which happened to be this little fire engine house. Doesn't look like much, but that's where Brown would be taken. It became known as John Brown's Fort, more or less where Brown made his last stand, and it truly became a symbol to former slaves, once the Civil War had ended, to former slaves of what slavery, what African Americans in bondage had endured. After the Civil War, the armory was no longer operating. The late 1800s, the railroad purchased that property, and they were ready to tear everything down. Some local businessmen purchased the fort, thinking, as we often do, that they were going to make some money they were wanted to make money on John Brown's name, on John Brown's story. And so the fort, the building was actually taken apart brick by brick, and it was moved to Chicago, Illinois, and put on display at the World's Fair. They charged 50 cents a person to go through this museum. And I've been told that they didn't even make $10. It's like $9.50. The fort was there in Chicago for a few years. There was a local newspaper woman out of Washington, D.C. called Kate Fields, who was lobbying to bring the fort back to where it belonged in Harpers Ferry, and she was trying to ensure that John Brown and his name and his story would continue. The town could not put it back on its original spot because the B&O Railroad, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, owned that property. But a local farmer by the name of Mr. Murphy, he could put the fort on his property. That's just adjacent to our visitor center, and that's part of the park today. Again, it was taken apart brick by brick, brought back to Harpers Ferry, placed on Mr. Murphy's farm. That's where it was located in 1906 when the Niagara movement visited here. And it was there for a few years. Again, taken apart brick by brick, moved to the campus of Storr College, where it served as a museum, it served as a bookstore, and it again was a symbol of freedom for the students there at Storr College. And then finally in 1967, the building was moved as one unit to its present location, which is in the lower town of Harpers Ferry, close to where it's set, but not exactly on the original spot. But hopefully one day we'll move it once again and we'll put it back to its rightful place. But about 3/4 of the bricks are the original. We've lost a few over the years, but certainly haven't lost the meaning and the significance of the building, that's for sure.
I also like, we talk about the Civil War, like how this was so pivotal, the Harpers Ferry raids, on the 155th anniversary of it this past October, then the death of John Brown by hanging on December 2nd. And my thing, I want to confirm something from you because you are a historian. So is it true that we know that John Brown surrendered Robert E. Lee and J.L. Stewart? We also know that I believe that John Brown was guarded by Stonewall Jackson, and we also know that his death was witnessed by John Wilkes Booth. Is that correct?
That is, and that's all of one of those twists that personally I love about American history, and I think it's so fascinating. Brown was here in 1859. There was a telegram that reached Washington, D.C., the War Department, that there was trouble in Harpers Ferry. Again, that there were insurgents attempting to take over the federal armory. They didn't know that it was John Brown. Robert E. Lee, who was a lieutenant colonel at that time, he was at his home in Arlington House. He was on a leave of absence. His father-in-law had passed away, and so he was just doing just odds and ends that the War Department asked of him to keep his commission going. They knew he was available. They immediately thought of him to lead the contingent out here to quell this trouble. The soldiers, the unit that they could pull together the most quickly was a group of Marines. And so although Robert E. Lee was an Army officer, he would lead unit of Marines out here to Harpers Ferry, which makes it even a little stranger. And it's said that when word came into the War Department, Jeb Stuart had been there, and he heard again that there was trouble in Harpers Ferry. He knew Lee personally. Lee was the superintendent at West Point when Stuart was there, and so he requested to Lee that he accompany him out here. And so Robert E. Lee and Jeb Stuart, who of course would be involved on the Confederate side of the Civil War, they would be the ones who would take Brown, and then Brown would stand trial. He was tried by the state of Virginia, and he would be tried on 3 counts. It was murder. A number of townspeople had been killed, although he himself did not have a hand in the killings. He was behind all of this. Treason, and it was treason against the state of Virginia, which is rather odd since it was a federal government installation. And then it was inciting slaves to rebel. And the trial would take 3 days. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes, and they came back with a guilty verdict on all 3 counts. And he was sentenced on November 2nd, 1859, to hang on December 2nd, 1859. And on December 2nd, for many in the South, they felt that this is where the Civil War was going to begin, at Brown's trial. There had been problems between the North and the South for years, so Brown certainly didn't start that. But what Brown did during that month period between his sentencing and then his ultimate execution, Brown began getting word out that from November 2nd to December 2nd, he began granting interviews, getting word out as to why he had come here and what he was trying to achieve. And for many people in the North, not everyone by no means, but for many people, they began to see Brown in a different light. And you'll hear words describing him as St. John the Just, John Brown the Martyr. And of course, Southerners didn't see him in that light. Because here was a man who had come onto Southern soil. Slavery was legal. The United States government said that it was. And so Brown was taking the law into his own hands. He was deciding himself that this law should be changed. And so many historians see that this is really where that wedge between the North and the South began to widen. And compromise was impossible now. And so many Southerners felt that Northerners were going to come in at the last minute of John Brown's execution and try to save him, and that this is where the conflict, this is where the fighting was going to start. And so to prevent that, he was closely guarded. There were cadets from the Virginia Military Institute, VMI in Virginia. They were led by, at that time, a professor at the Virginia Military Institute by the name of Thomas Jackson. He would later be known as Stonewall Jackson. And it's also said that a man by the name of John Wilkes Booth had borrowed a friend's uniform, a Southern militia, and that he was present as well, watching John Brown's execution. And so, of course, those 2 names would become very prominent later on once the Civil War erupted. So
was it true that John Brown refused rescue at the last minute? People were trying to actually break him out?
No one actually came to try to free him. But there is speculation, depending what books you read, historians, that this was his plan all along. That he realized he was going to get caught, but he was more than willing to give up his life for those 4 million people who were being held in bondage, and that if he could, bring that slavery issue more or less to a head, then that's what he wanted to do.
And I also heard that John Brown's father was a successful tanner, and that he actually, a apprentice of his was U.S. Grant's father. Is that true?
That is, Creighton, you help me with this. What's the story with Owen Brown?
I'm not sure.
I think that Owen had something with Grant. I don't know the specifics of that one, but I think there was some connection.
I'm just looking at the Civil War connection. It's kind of eerie. Like, he was fated to do what he had to do. Like, even when he went to Kansas, some of the worst guerrilla warfare, the Quantrill Raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson, it was like at the spot where he planted those seeds in bleeding Kansas. So everywhere he went, it's like he was the prophet of doom or something.
Well, he truly, Brown never said, and jump in there, what I'm saying is wrong. Brown, he never said that he had visions, and he never said that God spoke to him, but he firmly believed that this is what he was put on this earth to do. He strongly believed in Calvinism, the predestination, that this was the path that he was supposed to take, and he dedicated his entire life to that. He was trained as a tanner, and apparently he was he could have been a successful tanner, right. But he just, that's not what he was supposed to be doing in his mind. He was supposed to rid rid this country of the institution of slavery.
Are you familiar with like the Harriet Tubman vision? Like she said, she dreamed of John Brown before she met him, and he came to her as a serpent. Like like 3 serpents that came with human heads. I think she figured out that John Brown was the middle serpent, and then the other 2 was his sons who got killed at Harpers Ferry.
Really?
Yeah, because it said that Harriet Tubman, one of her regrets was that she wanted to be at Harpers Ferry.
Well, she was supposed to be here.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And she was sick, right? She became ill, and so did not join him. Which, I mean, gosh, because the majority of them that were here, they either were killed outright or they got captured and were executed.
Now, I'm gonna ask y'all this, like about the Django Unchained Quentin Tarantino film. Do y'all feel that's actually based on Dangerfield Newby's story? That was Dick Gregory told me, like Dangerfield.
Really?
Newby. Yeah, because when they found his body, I think he was like the first after the.
Well, he was the first raider that was killed.
And they found a letter on his body, right, about his wife being in bondage, and she wanted him to
Harriet, yes.
Yeah, so like it's kind of like on the Django thing.
Well, that he went to
try to rescue his wife.
Rescue her. Yeah.
So people were saying that that's Dangerfield Newby.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So y'all never heard about that? Y'all seen Django, right?
Yeah.
But if people say that's Dangerfield Newby, that was Dick Gregory told me. And I started researching. I said, okay, I can see that the letter thing. You know how you get it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's Hollywood, but like that letter, trying to rescue his wife from slavery. I can see that.
See where it could be.
Yeah, it could be a part of the narrative.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, that is.
It is.
Yeah, Dangerfield. That's a sad. Yeah, he was. He felt like he didn't have any other option.
Well, I said this about Frederick Douglass. He reminded me of Kobe Bryant with Shaq when Kobe got in trouble. And he said, well, Shaq was cheating too, but Shaq he wasn't facing jail time, Kobe. Like Frederick Douglass reminded me of Kobe Bryant, when John Brown told him about the thing he was trying to do, and he was just trying to put salt on it. And is that the right depiction of Frederick Douglass? Like he was trying to obstruct John Brown from doing what he had to do. Like he wasn't really supportive, but he was true about being a dead man's Aaron. Harpers Ferry.
Right, and I think that was really, Douglas's thing. He just thought. He told Brown, "You're going to go in there and you're going to get trapped. You're going to get stuck," which is actually what happened. And I don't think that Douglas thought that it was necessarily the smartest thing to be attacking a federal institution, like a government institution, that would take away from what Brown, people would focus in on that and take away from what Brown was trying to do. But yeah, if he had been here too, how history would have changed.
If Harriet Tubman and Frederick, wow. Mm-hmm. But he did do, I think, a real lately eulogy to John Brown in stores, right? Was that in the early 1880s?
Well, what's the quote? If John Brown did not start the war to end slavery, what is that quote that's in the...
I think it's something like, if John Brown did not end slavery,
Yes.
he struck the blow that
started the war to end slavery.
Or something worse to that.
I know, don't quote us. In the John Brown Museum, we have that on the wall in the John Brown Museum. You can see that. Mm-hmm.
I want to thank y'all once again. I'm just fascinated about this whole thing. I want to thank you for taking the time to tell us all this information. And for you helping her out, being good support, a team player.
Well, thank you.
Anything else you want to add?
Thank you for,
Do you have anything you want to add to?
Just, we really want everybody to come visit us here at Harpers Ferry National Historical Park. And, for those that are watching this, we have this so much diverse history. As Quinn said, we encourage everybody to come experience it. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Ranger Waters. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. It's nice talking. you.